Well, America is in a crisis of trust. True leadership is sorely lacking. But polls show that one institution still commands respect: the United States military. Take a look at this.
Marine Corps Captain Donovan Campbell fought his first battle in Iraq in 2004. He was leading a platoon of young men on their first deployment. He saw his comrades injured and killed throughout the days of fighting and faced the reality of his own possible death.
You got to make a tough decision in half a second or less. It is not the person that you want to be that's going to make that decision. It's the person you have trained yourself over time to be.
In The Leader's Code, Donovan shares his combat experiences and why his 6 keys to the military servant leader model are necessary in today's world.
Well, our next guest, a distinguished military man. He was hit and had the highest score in his first special basic class. Served, has a Bronze Star from his service over in the Middle East, Iraq, and Afghanistan. And this is a book called The Leader's Code. And it's a pleasure to introduce to you Captain Donovan Campbell. Hey, it's good to have you with us.
Hey, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
You got a good book. You know, you said something in this book is interesting, that if a guy can't shoot too well, he can get by and they'll forgive him, but if he lies, he's out. Tell us about that.
The military is maybe still the only secular institution that we have that teaches character before competence, and that's exactly what that's referring to. You can be perhaps a little bit less than competent at shooting, say, and the military will forgive that as a leader. What they will not forgive is a failure of character, because they still believe that virtue and character are of primary importance.
Why is that so important? You led a company of guys, 19-year-old Marines. You're in combat. Well, why is character so important?
Well, in combat, it's particularly important because you have to make life and death decisions on a daily basis. And so when you make them wrong, people die. And maybe that's your men that die, or maybe that's civilians that die. And you have to live with that for the rest of your life as a leader. So if you think to yourself, I am not the man I need to be, I am selfish, or I'm lazy, or I am deceitful, and someone died as a result of that, that's going to haunt you for the rest of your life. And the consequences of that are pretty much infinite.
So that's why well, you also said some of these Mickey Mouse things, you got to have an old style uniform. You have to polish your shoes and stand at attention and salute and so forth.
Well, but the beauty of that, and I didn't get it for a long time. In fact, when I got out of OCS, which is like basic school for officers, I told my wife, like, I am not a warrior. I'm like the most highly trained janitor in the entire world right now. Because I'm so good at scrubbing the floor with a toilet brush. But what they got was that, look, if you want to be a phenomenal leader when life and death is on the line, then you have to do the little things really well, day in and day out. And if you can't discipline yourself to do the little things, like always tell the truth when it'd be much easier to tell a small white lie, right? Like, I'll be there on time. If you can't discipline yourself to do that day in, day out, you will probably make the wrong decision when there is a life and death crisis or a big decision to be made.
That situation, you were in some pretty tough combat roles, and you were leading 19-year-old or 18-year-old Marines, and yet they were willing to sacrifice for their buddies. Were they sacrificing for America, for the Marine Corps, or for their fellow troopers?
So the short answer is yes.
For all of that?
Yeah, all that. I mean, first off, the amazing thing about the military, this is the thing that's so amazing about being a Christian, right, is you have a mission that is more important to you than your own life and your own comfort and your own happiness. And in many ways, Americans just don't get that. But the Marines get it and Christians get it. And the irony is that when you sacrifice, when you put your own life aside for something that's more important, you become more happy and you become more fulfilled, you become better able to endure life's tragedies, right? So that's the first thing. Like, they got it. They had a mission. And they were told, this mission is more important than your life. And they said, we get it, and we're all about it, and we will do things that will risk our lives for that. And then what they saw, and this is what I love, like my 19-year-old corporal, he was a fire team leader. He had 3 guys for him. Well, one day, I look at him like, Corporal Teague, every day we walk down the road and we look for bombs. and you lead the platoon when we do that, and you will lead your men. You are literally the point man, the number one guy as you walk down the road. I said, you don't have to do that, Teague. You know, you might want to think about being behind your guys so you can guide and direct them. He said, hey, sir, here's the deal. If a bomb will go off. It's just a matter of time. And when it happens, I want to make sure that my body is in between that bomb and my men. Because I want to take it for them. So the second key principle that gets people to sacrifice for you is they see that you're willing to sacrifice for them first. It's just like Christ, right? Like we follow him because he sacrificed for us first. He didn't ask us to do something for him. He gave his life so that we could be saved.
You know, you think of kids today as being self-centered and selfish. That's anything but selfish. That is selfless.
It is. And watching a 19-year-old run into enemy machine gun fire and wave his arms and scream, shoot at me, someone shoot at me, so that his wounded buddy, the fire would be distracted from him, really restores your faith in the young men and women that our nation are producing. And I have a lot of hope for our country. I really do. We just need some good leaders to step up.
You pointed out also some of the flaws that took place at RU. You have an MBA and you got it, but Enron, Bernie Madoff, the toxic waste that was spewed out by Wall Street. Talk about some of those things.
Well, I think those are all symptomatic of a culture that no longer values virtue. And they don't say, hey, if you want to lead well, you have to have specific, clear virtues. It's there's no relativism here. So when we take virtue and we put it off to the side and we focus instead on competence, like how intelligent are you, which is good. How good are you at marketing? How good are you at strategy? How good are you at financial modeling? You forget that all of that's irrelevant if you don't tell the truth. Then we spawn people like Jeff Skilling or Bernie Madoff who have no problem telling a small white lie, and then they cover it up and they cover it up and they cover it up. And the next thing you know, they're being marched off in an orange jumpsuit and they're going to prison.
Sure.
That's what happens.
You pointed out your thing that really horrifies you, that they were selling those mortgages and they were calling it toxic waste behind the scenes.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, when you don't value virtue and you don't value character and you don't have the guts to raise your hand and say, this is wrong, and you know what? If I have to make a sacrifice, like lose my job to call that out, I will make said sacrifice because I believe that morality is more important than money.
This may be, as they laughingly say, above your pay grade, but what do you think about that mess in Afghanistan? I was over in that part of the world some years ago. Well, of course, I was in Korea, but some of these wars, it's kind of like, who needs them?
Well, I think as it relates to Afghanistan, one, I did my third tour in Afghanistan, so I've got some time or since. Yeah, that's me in Afghanistan. I think it's hard for Americans to conceptualize of a country like that because it's not a state. I mean, it's not really a nation in any sense of the word, and has not been since really Alexander the Great conquered it. So that's one problem that we have. The second problem is, again, it's like our own lives. If we don't know what our mission in life is, if we don't know what's most important, if we don't have a vision of the goal that we want to achieve, how are we going to achieve it? Yeah. It's not that dissimilar in Afghanistan. I served with ISAF, and I saw all of these countries, to include America, have very different ideas of what success looked like, of what the nation should look like. And so how are you going to succeed if you can't even agree on what success is? And our men and women in uniform are making heroic and amazing sacrifices day in and day out. But that's not enough. You have to know why you're making and what you're trying to achieve if you want to achieve it.
The leadership doesn't know. They don't know what the goal is.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We don't know what right looks like there. Is it a stable democracy? Is it a stable autocracy? Is it an unstable nation that just doesn't export terrorism? It's very hard to say, and it's very complex. It's not an easy thing to figure out.
Well, this is a very provocative book, ladies and gentlemen. It's one that I think would be very helpful in any area of leadership, whether it has to do with a church or a corporation or a military or whatever. And Donovan Campbell's book, The Leader's Code, available wherever books are sold. What was that other one you wrote, that Joker one or something?
Yeah, it was, the Joker one was my first book. And I can tell everyone I'm an accidental author. I mean, I did not mean to write a book, but when I was in business school, I felt like I let my Marines down because I did not write them up for enough awards because I didn't realize how heroic that they were. And I went to my professor, my leadership professor, and said, "Sir, I screwed this up. I mean, I didn't do what I should have done for my guys, but I want to make it up. I want to write their story and email it to them. So that way they can give it to their moms and their dads and their wives and their sisters and fiancés and say, hey, look, I don't talk about what I did, but it was amazing. My lieutenant wrote it down. Here you go. Here's my story." And that's how that book came to be.
New York Times bestseller. It touched a lot of hearts.
Yeah, for a guy who's not an author and never intended to be, that's all right.
Donovan, don't quit. You're doing a very good job. Well, God bless you and thank you.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Simplify, man.
Simplify.
Christy.